Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story yourself you'd like to share? We would love to hear from you. Just email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. I'm BJ Odom, you know, the guy with more parts than a chicken nugget. My new memoir, it is packed with laughs, heart, and the unbelievable true story of survival you've heard me talk about right here on the Gift of Life podcast. So make sure you get your copy today. More parts than a chicken nugget. Available now on Amazon. As we welcome you to episode 102, as we begin to celebrate Donate Life Month, all month long in April here on the Gift of Life podcast. As sometimes life brings the stories full circle in ways we never expect. And today's episode is exactly that. If you've been with us for a while, you may remember on episode 55, her incredible heart transplant journey, and her husband George from episode 56, sharing what it means to be a caregiver. But today, George's story takes a powerful new turn. He's no longer just one supporting someone through transplant. He became the one giving the gift of life. This story is of faith, love, and selflessness. And I promise you won't want to miss it. As we'll talk to George Cecere coming in next. George, great to have you back on the podcast and welcome aboard.
Well, hi, BJ. It's great to talk to you again today. I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you again. Yeah, it's been a pretty active time, that's for sure. Of course, we talked about Terri's heart transplant, which occurred in 2022, and about our beginning of our advocacy journey and the formation of TCH Caregivers Heart back then. And all of that in that journey has sort of just continued, and I would venture to say it's accelerated over the time frame since we last talked. So, yeah, a lot of things have happened. First of all and foremost, let me talk about Terri. She's doing well. She's 40 months now post-transplant. We've had, the usual bumps and challenges along the road. That happens. She was diagnosed with CAV, cardio allograft vasculopathy, which is the chronic form of rejection for heart transplant recipients after year one. And I'm happy to report that, 2 years later, that has shown little or no progression. And actually some of the medical therapy that they've done, the medication changes have actually slowed the progression and reversed it in a few areas. So that's great news. So that kind of gave us the green light to continue our journey and to continue our advocacy. We're ambassadors, very active for Network for Hope, the OPO that facilitated her transplant. We've also become ambassadors for Life Connection of Ohio, which is another OPO in our area. And I'm also an ambassador with the Chris Klug Foundation out of Colorado. So we're very active in that, along with working with a couple of different SODA organizations, student organ donation advocates, to help that next generation of potential organ donors become better educated about the need for organ donation.
When do you rest?
Not very often. So we continue to do that. I also was very fortunate and honored to be elected to the Donate Life Kentucky Trust Board of Directors. So I've started working with them. I'm very excited. It's a 501c organization that works with Network for Hope. And they do some things. They fill in where the OPOs and the hospitals can't for recipient families and donor families, providing things like gas cards and overnight stays and even help with cremation for donor families. It's a really wonderful organization. It's been around for quite a while, and I'm honored to be part of that and have the opportunity to serve on the board there. Network for Hope, the OPO we've been affiliated with, honored me with their 2025 Ambassador Award, which was a surprise. So that was kind of fun. So that's happened too. But some other things have happened. So Terri and I, decided that, 3 years out or so, we were ready to start to begin as much as we could, getting back to the new normal. And one of the things that we had a goal when I retired back in 2019, before COVID and before her transplant, was to finish our journey of visiting all 50 states. So in the last 12 months, we were able to accomplish that. We had 15 states to go. We picked up 12 of them with 3 different driving vacations, little states bundled together, took Lincoln, our dog, with us as well. And we hit all those states and spent some time and did some fun things in those states. And then later last year, July, and then in September, we ventured out for the first time via air travel. We went to Alaska and picked that state up, and then one final trip to pick up Wyoming and Idaho, and completed that 50-state goal. So that was pretty cool. That's something that, again, had Terri not gone through the transplant and we had not been on this journey, had a donor family not agreed to donation, we never would have had the opportunity to finish that and to experience that. So that was pretty meaningful for both of us.
Now, was that because you were advocating, or was it kind of vacation to see all the states and advocate, or what was that journey?
Well, it's interesting. It was mostly vacation and again, achieving a goal that we had set back in 2019. However, advocacy is always with us, and there's a beautiful story about a young man who was a donor, was 15 years old when he passed. His name was Nick, here in the Cincinnati area. And the OPO, Network for Hope, had decided that they had gotten a hold of Nick's bucket list. And one of the things Nick wanted to do was travel. So the OPO had kind of put together a secret program, a secret from his mom and his dad, who are ambassadors as well that we work with, and asked people who were traveling to take a picture of Nick along with them, and then take pictures of him in these various, iconic locations. So we were honored to bring him along on all of our travels and take pictures of him in Alaska and in Wyoming and in all the states that we went to of those 15. So yeah, we had a little bit of advocacy with us on the way, but it was vacation as well, something that we wanted to accomplish. But, I guess it's just kind of symbolic of, the mission that has become kind of our purpose in life. And that is to advocate for caregivers, for organ donation, and just for the whole transplant community. So yeah, we actually brought them with us. One other really significant thing, again, that became a very, very meaningful moment. 3 weeks ago, yesterday, our great grandson was born. His name is Lorenzo, and our grandson Brendan and Mulin had him, like I said, just 3 weeks ago. So, obviously a pretty cool thing to have a great grandchild anyway, but again, brought home and made even more meaningful because of the fact that, had not Terri had the transplant 40 months ago, she never would have had the chance to hold him in her arms as she has now. So that was also a really, really meaningful thing for us.
Always a beautiful thing. Yeah. Especially, with children, with everything, it's the extra life that you get because of the transplant can just mean so very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some exciting things coming up. We've got Donate Life Month coming up next month, which we're already starting to fill up our calendars. I think we're going to do a couple of flag raising speeches and a couple of other events already on the calendar. And then the other thing that we really thought was going to be a lot of fun, I'd heard about, a few years ago, I heard about the transplant games that are held, the every other year event for transplant community. And this year it's being held in Denver. So we decided to sign up to go, and we're going to go visit and meet with a bunch of other transplant recipients and transplant donors and families and advocates in Denver. So that'll be fun. Our son lives in Boulder, so it'll be a dual purpose trip. We'll get a chance to see him and his wife as well. So that'll be kind of fun. We're looking forward to that as well.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That's something that in the back of my mind, I've thought many times I need to do, if nothing else, just to advocate, for not only organ donation, but the program we do here, because I wouldn't doubt I'd be able to line up lots of different stories and guests from that trip.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's not something, we're not going to compete. That you have the option to be a competitor or a non-competitor. We're not going to compete. We want to kind of get the lay of the land first before we venture out that far. But just to have that opportunity to gather with all these people that are inspirational in their journeys and that, are just experiencing the same thing. We're with Team Ohio, so we get to walk in, to the opening ceremonies. I'm never going to go to the Olympics. So, this is going to be the next best thing. So we're looking forward to it.
Now, you are Terri's caregiver, and I've said this a million times on the show, and so many people, that our recipients have talked about their caregivers. And you went a step further. You started a caregiver club that you do right there on Zoom, and you're getting all the way across the United States. So you're doing a marvelous job. Why don't you tell us just a little bit more about that? Because, some people remember maybe back to, some do not. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that group?
Yeah, that's been quite some time ago. So yeah, you're talking about TCH Caregivers Heart. So really, it was born out of a need that I found for support. When Terri first had her transplant, I was the tough guy, and I thought, I'm not going to need any help, and I'll be fine. And I quickly realized how wrong I was about that, because the caregiver journey is one that I guess I'd been on for a while through some other health challenges that Terri and I had back when she was 16 years old and I was 18. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma just shortly after we met and went through chemotherapy and surgery and all the rest. And I stuck with her back then, and that was kind of the start of our journey some 50 years ago, which is amazing for me to say it was 50 years ago. But anyway, I realized after her transplant that there were many support opportunities and support groups for the recipient. And there were quite a few who included the recipient and the caregiver, thankfully. But there were very limited resources for the caregiver themselves. And, it occurred to me because I joined a group out of Philadelphia at Howie's house there, a caregiver group one of the few existing ones. And it occurred to me that was a really needed resource, that the caregivers, walk a parallel path with the recipient, certainly, and they go through a lot of the things the recipient does, but they also have their own journey emotionally and mentally and even physically. It's a different journey than the recipient to some degree. And it just struck me that there really needed to be some way for those people to connect. So I got with the transplant hospital, the Christ Hospital in Cincinnati, where Terri had her transplant. And we sort of got the idea of getting started, with the heart transplant group. Now, it turns out Terri was actually the first recipient at that hospital. They had been a kidney transplant hospital for 50 years, but they had just literally opened their transplant program, and Terri had the honor of being the first one. So it was a relatively small group, but that was kind of where my focus was. We started TCH Caregivers Heart. There were about a dozen people who joined, and I'd have 2 or 3 people who would join the every other week sessions that we had on Zoom. And I got to feel more comfortable, and I decided a few months in that I really wanted to kind of expand that. And so through social media and some contacts I had, I just sort of said, let's open this up to all transplant centers, any kind of organ transplant, and let's see what happens. So from that dozen people back a couple of years ago when we started, to that point where I made the decision to open it up, I now have 180 members from across the country, represent every type of organ transplant, every corner of the country, and we meet every week now on Zoom. I have a session every week, different times, different days to try to accommodate the different time zones, and every single one of them is uplifting, and it just, I guess, maybe speaks to the need for the recipients. I get new members joining all the time, and they'll come on and they'll say, I didn't know what to expect, but it just feels like a family, and it gives them the opportunity to spend an hour, once a week if they can, or whenever they can. Doesn't have to be, everybody doesn't have to join every time, but gives them that opportunity to step away from their role as a caregiver and spend some time with people who get it. And it helps them to understand that they're not alone. And I think just that knowledge, I had a brand new, literally day before yesterday, transplant person joined yesterday. She missed the session. She texted me, sort of afterwards and said, oh my God, I really need to talk. I said, hey, let's jump on Zoom. I'll talk with you one-on-one. And we did. And there were tears and there was fear. And then by the time we were done, she just said, wow, I don't feel so alone. And I said, well, join us next week and, whenever you can. And it's just really a wonderful thing that people can have a place to go and maybe feel, again, that they're not walking this path alone, that they've got others who understand. So that's kind of what TCH Caregivers Heart is all about. And I'm just thrilled that it's thriving and growing. And more importantly, if it reaches one person and it helps them, just like I did with that new person yesterday, that's really all I was after. And I'm so glad that it's going, and hopefully it'll keep going for a long, long time. It's something I don't intend to stop. As long as I can do it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Now, I remember too, when we went back to episode 59, when I first talked with you, something that you said just really hit me hard, and I never thought about it. But after that day, I have thought about it, and I've thought about it a lot. That's where, sometimes as a caregiver, you've got, and here I am a recipient, but I'm going to talk kind of as a caregiver because, you see what goes through it. But I never thought about the resentment and the they go through a lot. And I know a few times that my wife has, had to be in the hospital and had some surgeries and had a bout with breast cancer. And I was on that other side of the bed. And it is a completely different feeling. It's a feeling I do not like. I do not like being on the other side of the bed. And that's what I think is so great about what you're doing and, giving the people a chance to either praise what's going on and being happy for, their spouse or the one they're caring for, or the opposite. This is hard. This is not easy. And it's daily. Yeah. And so I my hat goes off to you because I think you're doing a great job, and it's appreciated by many. I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. But honestly, there's a selfish motivation too. It helps me. It's very cathartic because I'm walking the journey as well. Even though we're 40 months out, I have people in the group who are pre-transplant, who were just transplanted, and I have people who are 10 or 15 years out. And I'm talking about caregivers now. And even the folks that are 10 years out, 15 years out, still find the need to connect with the caregivers because, you talked about resentment, and that's one that's tough to talk about, but it's a real emotion that almost every caregiver I've run into. I mean, I don't have a scientific study, but anecdotally, I can tell you that just about everybody I run into feels some form of that. And it's typically not resentment against the loved one they're caring for. It's resentment against the situation. It's the one thing that kind of just sort of lays back there and rears its ugly head every once in a while. Another one that's really common is isolation. And we talk about isolation even when you're in a room full of people. And some of that comes from the fact that people outside of the transplant community, and even as a subset of that outside the caregiver community, just don't really understand the journey. I mean, you've probably experienced this too. People say, oh, you had a transplant, you're fixed, everything's cool. Well, you and I both know that's not the case. You're pretty much just trading one condition for another. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a huge amount of gratitude that goes along with that, because even through the resentment, the isolation, and the other thing is uncertainty that rears its head so much for them, what's going to happen next. Even through all that, the one thing that's overwhelming in terms of emotion and feelings that come out of it is gratitude. It's really amazing. Almost every session that we do, we talk about hard things. We have people that cry. We joke a little bit too. We talk about good things that happen, those small victories, because they're important as well. But at the end of the day, almost every time it comes right back around to gratitude. Everybody understands that this is hard, but the alternative is not what we hope for. The alternative is, I look at it every day. I wake up every day and grateful for the day and grateful for everything that's happened, because I look back and say, well, if it had not been for all of this, I wouldn't still have Terri. And again, we've been married 48 years this August and been together for 50. It's a lifetime. And, gratitude is really the overwhelming emotion. And that's uplifting. Every once in a while, we all have an up day or a down day. And sometimes I'll have a down day and I'll jump on one of the meetings. And when I come back out, I'm just refreshed because of the resilience and the strength that the caregiver community shows.
I think this is something my wife needs to do. And maybe she has, because I mentioned your story, what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And I,
right.
kind of going over, the podcast that I was recording today. And she came up, well, you must be talking with George. So I don't know, maybe she's been at a few of those meetings and she just didn't let me know about it, but she seems to know George pretty well. So yeah, I thought that was quite humorous. And she goes, oh, you're talking to George today? And I'm like, whoa, how did she know this? So now I'm wondering, has she been to some of your meetings or not?
Yeah, you better watch out, BJ. She's got eyes.
Something else. You're talking about all these things you've done, which is like mind blowing to me, thinking, how's this guy not worn out? And then you go one step further. Are you just trying to overshadow all of us? That's all I needed to know.
No, but I do know what you're talking about, and I'm happy to share that as well. So, all of these things, and you say that, and am I tired, and all these things, but none of it seems like a burden. It really doesn't. It just feels like the natural progression of this journey. And let me also just say this: the strength comes from Terri. She is so much behind this, so strongly behind everything we do, such a positive influence. I say to her, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. She says, go for it, and it's just uplifting. So it's a journey we're walking together, and I really couldn't be happier. And, we tell people sometimes that ask about it, I don't even remember what I did in my real life prior to this. You know what I mean? This is my life now.
Well,
this
let me tell you,
we do.
Right up front, I'm going to tell you that I love you like a brother, but let me tell you, you're freaking crazy. That's all I'm going to say. But ladies and gentlemen, whether you know this or not, George has also become a kidney donor. So take it away and tell me your story.
All right. Well, I'm happy to. So anyway, you kind of heard the background, but last August, Terri and I were sitting around and I had been kind of, toying with the idea as I learned more and more about kidney and the need for kidney donation. So a couple of statistics, overall in the country, there's roughly 110,000 people waiting for a transplant right now. Of that group of 110,000, nearly 90,000 of those are waiting for a kidney. And the average wait for a kidney from a deceased donor is 5 to 7 years. And so those folks are living on dialysis, which is not an easy road. I had enough kidney caregivers in my group to understand how that is. Sometimes it's 5 to 7 hours a day. Sometimes it's 5 to 6 days a week. Many of them now do it at home, but it severely limits your quality of life. And, that's something that just kind of struck me. And so I started reading stories about that, and I started talking with caregivers about that. And it just kind of struck me, that wow, there's got to be something that can be done. Well, with kidney, there's an option to deceased donation for kidney, and that's living donation, because all of us have, or most of us, there are some people that are born with just one, but most of us have 2 kidneys, and we can live normal, productive, healthy lives with just one. And so living donation is a real thing. And I started looking into that. I started thinking about it. And, like everything else, I just mentioned how, Terri's always behind it. We were sitting around last August, and I just said to her, I saw a story today about a family that there are a mother, a son, and a daughter who all are afflicted with the same kidney disease. And all 3 at the same time now need a transplant. I said, man, that's just amazing that they're out there and that's happened. And it's heartbreaking that they're struggling and trying to find that. And I said, I've been thinking about being a donor. And she said, again, immediately, she said, oh, absolutely, George, that would be wonderful. It'd be a great way to, bring our story full circle. And I said, yeah. She said, look into it. So anyway, I started to look into it. I contacted the transplant center and said, what's the process? And, I was 67 at the time, so I'm a little older. There's a little more scrutiny that they do. And they say, well, we start with some blood tests, and then, we see what that looks like. And then if that looks okay, we go from there with some further testing and so on and so forth. I said, okay, great, let's get started. So I started the process in August and went through all of the testing. And let me just say that the testing is extensive. Maybe not quite as extensive as the recipient, but it's pretty extensive. And the number one thing that they emphasize to me is that the health of the donor is our first priority. Yes, we need donors, and yes, we want to help, the kidney patients that need donation. But, we also want to make sure that we're going to leave you as the donor with, a quality of life and a functioning kidney. And I started looking into some of the statistics, and, there were a lot of statistics and studies that showed that living donors actually have more longevity and are healthier, and that they also receive sort of an emotional boost by doing this, and that there's plenty of studies that you can function well without once you've been determined to be a donor. So I went through the process, and each stage along the way, I got approval to move on. And it takes a while because there's a lot to it. And finally, just kind of ironically, and I guess maybe another way to say that this was ordained and meant to be, on November 6th of 2025, which was the 3rd anniversary of Terri's heart transplant, I received notification from the coordinator that I had been approved by the donation board and was eligible to become a donor. So that in itself was like confirmation to me that this was the right thing to do. So that was exciting. I had been hoping for it, and I was really thrilled that happened. And it was just meaningful that it happened on that particular day, which is a day of celebration anyway. About a heart anniversary, that's an important day. And so I work with an organization as well called Off the List, who help kidney recipients, people who need a kidney, basically market the fact that they're looking for a living donor. And so I had read some profiles, and I had some information about people, and had the conversation with Terri. I said, I just can't choose. They're all so deserving. I'm going to go to the hospital and say, look, you have a list. I want to donate to that list. You pick who's going to be the best match and who's going to have the best outcome. So it ended up being that my donation was altruistic, and that I didn't know directly who the donor was going to be. But I scheduled it for December 2nd of 2025 and had the surgery.
Man, you are a champion, buddy.
So, the surgery was, as any surgery, it's a major surgery, but they do it laparoscopically, and it's, small incisions, but they are removing an organ. So, they're moving some things around, and recovery is pretty quick. I was out of the hospital in 2 days, feeling really good. I will say, full disclosure, I did have a complication that's very unusual. It really didn't have anything to do directly with the donation process, but did have to do with the surgery. And I did end up back in the hospital for about 6 days, and I was pretty sick. But even that, doesn't dampen the enthusiasm or the satisfaction that I have for being able to give the gift of life. I mean, Terri received that gift from an anonymous donor, someone who we've unfortunately not had contact with, although we understand, that they went through a terrible tragedy to provide that gift. And just having the ability to, enhance somebody else's life by donating the kidney, I go back to gratitude. I honestly feel gratitude that I was healthy enough to be able to do it, even at a little bit of an advanced age. And I kind of told myself all through the process, worst thing can happen here is I'm going to get one heck of a medical workup, and I'm going to know if I'm healthy or know if I'm not.
Yeah, that's worth it a lot of times.
Yeah, that was worth it.
It can save your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I said that too, BJ. If they find something, I'd really rather know about it, than not know about it. So anyway, fortunately, I was healthy enough and was able to donate, and I'm so happy. I've had some contact with my recipient. I've not met her in person, but we have communicated, and she happens to be my age, the same age, born the same month, actually 9 days older than me. She'd been on dialysis for 5 years. 5 days a week. So, been fighting with this for quite some time. So we've got a couple of things coming up in April where I'm going to have the opportunity to meet her in person, and I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe you can have her contact me and we can hear her story also.
I think I could do that. That's a great idea. I'll definitely do that when I meet with her.
Yeah, because that would be like a really, we call this kind of like a full circle moment. Hearing from her will even complete the circle completely.
Absolutely.
Now, is her caregiver, do they attend your caregiver sessions?
Not that I'm aware. I have a lot of kidney caregivers. She's aware of the group because she's kind of asked a few questions, but when I do get the chance to meet her in person, I certainly have that on my mind to encourage her caregiver to join. I'm going to speak at a meeting for Off the List coming up in April, and I believe she and her caregiver will be in attendance there. So I'll have the opportunity to invite her personally to join the group.
And I have had those folks also on the podcast, so make sure you tell them a big hello from me, and thanks for all they do.
Yeah, I sure will. Yeah, I know you had Darcy from Off the List on the podcast as well.
So, hey, I tell you, in the transplant community, I think you rank as, superstar, rock star guy.
Well, I appreciate that. That's not what I'm shooting for. I'm just happy to be able to help support people going through this. It's I thought, again, I go back to gratitude all the time, but I'm grateful that Terri and I are of the mind and in a position to be able to do these things. And if we encourage somebody or we help somebody, I had one person who called me after seeing the donation, said, you inspired me to become tested, to become a living donor. Now, they didn't qualify. It's an interesting statistic. Of the people who try to become a living donor, only about 35 to 40% of them actually make it through. So, the restrictions are they're pretty careful. They want to make sure that, they want to make sure that the recipient or that the donor is healthy post-transplant. So, but yeah, even if just one person, that's why we talk about it. If one person hears the story, if one person says, wow, I'm going to look into that, then it's all worth it. That's the way I look at it.
And that's why we are up to episode 102 today, because the
That's
very
right.
same thing. The more people that hear it and the more people that learn all about it, the more people will get involved in the whole community.
Absolutely. And you know, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's trying to make sure people make an informed decision when they think about organ donation. And you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and this year's been challenged with a lot of misinformation in the media and misconceptions that are out there. And you know, one of the ways I think is most important to get the truth out there is to have people who are part of the community share those stories, because it kind of brings it home. You can look at the statistics and you can look at all of the numbers, and that's important to understand and recognize that. But what really brings it home to people and makes them, you know, maybe stop and consider is hearing the stories. And it's not just the recipient stories, it's the donor stories. The donor stories are amazing. And I don't mean living donor, like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who, you know, in their worst hour of their lives, make the decision to allow organ donation for their loved ones. And just the fact that the loved one asked to be an organ donor in the first place. You know, that's amazing. And we've been so blessed to meet so many donor families, not our own for Terri, but so many donor families who just, you know, are so gracious and just want to know that their loved one's gift meant something to somebody. And, you know, to be able to share that with them is powerful. And yeah, that's why what you do with your podcast, and congratulations on 100+ episodes. That's amazing. But that's why what you do is so vital. It gets the word out, and that's really all we're trying to do.
And how's Terri doing today, by the way?
She is just doing wonderfully. She really is. She's so excited to be a great grandmother and living life. And, you know, we're getting ready, like I said, for Donate Life Month and getting back out there and sharing the story. And, you know, again, she feels like every day is a blessing and every day is something to be grateful for. And we've got plans for the Transplant games and for a couple of other trips and a reunion with some cousins we haven't seen in a long time. You know, we're living life. You know, you never know what tomorrow brings, but our goal is to live life every day and to live it to the fullest. And, you know, we're careful. We do the things we need to do to make sure that she's not vulnerable. But yeah, life is good. And we're looking forward to the next, well, we may not make another 50 years, but certainly another long period of time together.
That works for me. Before we let you go, why don't you give us information? If there's any caregivers out there that would be interested in joining your Zoom meeting once a week for the caregivers, let them know how they can either contact you or get involved.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, probably the best way is our website. There's information out there on how to register. You can register to be a donor. You can get information on living donation. You can join our Facebook group. You can do pretty much everything from the website. Most importantly, register for the online group. So that is TCH Caregivers Heart.com. So all one word, TCH Caregivers Heart.com. And at that website, you can hear a little bit more about Terri's story. You can see some information about all those things. And most importantly, you can register, join the group. And I encourage people, even if you're a caregiver out there and you're hearing this and you're going, I don't know if I want to talk with people. Well, I have a good number of people who join regularly at every meeting who I've never seen. They don't put their camera on and they don't speak, but they talk in the chat and they come and they listen. And then I get emails from them and they say, that's more than enough for me. So, you know, you don't have to be on camera. You don't have to talk, but I encourage you to come and listen. Just hearing the stories and hearing the conversation from other people is uplifting and comforting. And, you know, at the end of the day, community is so important, and that's what TCH Caregivers Heart is all about. So thank you for letting me put that website out there. Hopefully we'll have some people hear that and join.
All right. Anything else you want to mention or talk about before we let you go since this is actually try number 2. Something went wrong with my equipment here, so we had to start all over again.
Well, I'm glad we made it through. Thank you so much, BJ, for having me. As always, I appreciate it. And, we're going to keep on keeping on, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk again. But it's always great to talk to you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, George, for continuing to update us on your journey through transplantation. And be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode. And if you have a transplant story, please email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and also don't forget to like and share this episode with family and friends. And we would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, my memoir, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, isn't just a medical story. It's a survival story filled with humor, hope, and heart. It'll make you laugh, maybe even cry, and definitely believe in second chances. Get yours now. More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, available on Amazon. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and former radio partner Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network. We want to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.